seventh graders, future eighth graders. For those who don't know me and haven't had me in class before, my name is Ms. Broda, and I'm a literacy teacher here at Mahoney Middle School. And today I'm making this video to share with you a little bit about our summer reading book recommendations for this summer, the summer of 2021. And we've chosen the books that I'm about to share with you because we think you're going to like them, and also because some of them may connect to themes or topics that you might learn about in the 8th grade. Some of these books have even been loved and endorsed by former and current 8th graders from this year. So we're recommending these books, but you're certainly encouraged to read anything that you have access to or you're interested in reading over the summer. The goal is just to read as much as possible throughout the summer months. One of the first activities that 8th grade teachers will ask you to do next fall is something about your summer reading experience. It's not a test or anything like that you need to be worried about, but they will ask you to do something like write a letter about a book that you read, or design a new book cover, or something along those lines. So we hope that you choose to read one of these books or something else entirely altogether. Just be prepared to share about what you read when you start 8th grade in the fall. Today we're recommending 10 books from different genres and different formats, so we hope that you'll be able to find a book or two on this list that you are excited to read. Our first book on our recommended list is New Kid by Jerry Craft, and this is a graphic novel. In this book, 7th grader Jordan Banks loves to draw cartoons, and he's a really talented artist. He has a goal of going to a local art school, but his parents enroll him in a private school known for its great academics instead. Jordan realizes that he is one of only a few students of color in the entire grade. He makes a daily trip to Riverdale Academy Day School, but he finds himself torn between the two worlds, the world of his private school and the world of his neighborhood, and he's not really fitting into either one anymore. Jordan has to navigate this new school while also trying to keep his neighborhood friends. There's a sequel to New Kid that was just released in 2020, and that book is called Class Act. So if you choose to read New Kid and you enjoy it, you can continue Jordan's story by reading Class Act. This next book is called Fish in a Tree, and it's by Linda Mullally Hunt. And in this book, the main character, Allie, experiences life with a reading disability. She has been smart enough to fool a lot of people and has been able to hide her reading difficulties by creating clever and disruptive distractions. Allie is afraid to ask for help, but then she meets her new teacher, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Daniels sees the bright kid underneath the troublemaker. And with Mr. Daniels' help, Allie learns to not be so hard on herself, and she learns that dyslexia is nothing to be ashamed of. She discovers a lot about herself in the process, and she learns that great minds don't always think alike. Fish in a Tree is a book that's recommended and endorsed by current 8th grade students. We had a lot of students that reflected on this book and said that they really enjoyed it. This book is March, Book 1 by John Lewis, Andrew Aiden, and Nate Powell. And this is a graphic nonfiction. It shares the true life story of the late Congressman John Lewis, and it's told in graphic novel format. John Lewis was one of the key figures in the civil rights movement. He was committed to justice and nonviolence. John Lewis grew up on an Alabama sharecropper's farm, and he experienced segregated schools and regular community violence against people of color. He later participated in the 1963 March on Washington and became a congressman, even receiving the Medal of Freedom. And this graphic nonfiction is part of a 3-part series. This is part 1. And The whole series was inspired by a 1958 comic book called Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story that John Lewis was inspired by when he was younger. Our next book is Legend by Marie Lu. In Legend, what was once the Western United States is now home to the Republic, a nation perpetually at war with its neighbors. This story takes place in what was once Los Angeles. Day and June are the two main characters, and they are teenagers on opposite sides of this dystopian regime. Day is an outlaw, and he steals money and medicine for family and others. And June is being prepared to be involved in leadership within the ruling party. When June's older brother is killed, all of the clues point towards Day, and June seeks revenge. But neither June nor Day is prepared for what will happen when their paths cross. Legend is a dystopian fiction book. Fans of the Hunger Games series might enjoy this book, and it is part of a series. This is book 1. So for those of you who like series reading, you might be interested in Legend. This book is Last Man Out by Mike Lupica. And in Last Man Out, 12-year-old Tommy Gallagher is a tough football player. He's learned from his dad, Patrick, a really brave Boston firefighter. Tommy's dad has taught him everything about football and about life. Tommy isn't prepared for what happens when the sirens go off, and for the first time, they're racing away from the fire. First man in, last man out has always been his dad's and the Boston firefighters' motto. And Tommy has to dig deep to live up to his dad's motto during these tough times. This book is set in New England, and it's a good tribute to the tradition of New England sports and the bravery of New England firefighters. Mike Lupica is a really popular sports fiction author, and you may have read other books that he's written in the past. This next book is A Time to Dance, and it's by Padma Venkataraman. For Veda, a classical dance prodigy in India, her life revolves around dancing. When an accident leaves her a below-the-knee amputee, Veda is devastated. She wonders, will she ever be able to dance again? And adjusting to her prosthetic leg is painful and humbling. Veda refuses to let her disability take away her dreams of being a dancer, so she starts all over again by taking dance classes with the youngest, most inexperienced dancers. Veda discovers what dance means to her through the challenge of learning to dance again. A Time to Dance is a novel written in verse, so it's similar to long-form poetry. So those of you who like that format will really like this book a lot. Our next book is I Am Malala, the Young Readers Edition, and this is by Malala Yousafzai. And many of you may have heard of her or recognize her name for her world-famous work for advocating for education for girls around the globe. Malala Yousafzai was raised in a once peaceful area of Pakistan that was transformed by terrorism. Malala was taught by her parents to stand up for what she believes in, and she believed in educational opportunities for girls. She received great support from her parents, but advocating was not always easy because the terrorists in her country took the opposite position. So Malala was attacked by the Taliban, and they tried to kill her, but she continued to stand for peace and for education. Malala was the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and she continues to be an advocate to this day. And this book is an autobiography, so she wrote it about her own experience. This book is another title that was recommended and endorsed by former 8th graders. Our next book is The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman. And this is a historical fiction book. And it takes place in two countries. It takes place in Russia and the Ukraine in the year 1986. This book is written in alternating perspectives between two girls, Valentina and Oksana. So one chapter will be Valentina's point of view, and the next chapter will be Oksana's, and they will alternate throughout the book. Both of these girls, their fathers work at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and they're on duty when there's an explosion in the nuclear reactor. The sky turns red from the disaster, and radiation starts to attack the townspeople. Valentina and Oksana are forced to flee their home, and they have to get along when they travel together, despite being enemies at school just the day before. There's also a touching sub-story about a Jewish girl named Rivka living in Russia in 1941, and those stories connect in a surprise. This is a historical fiction book. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant explosion really did happen. So that's the true part of the story, but the characters and the actions are fictional. Our next book is York by Laura Ruby. And this book is set in an alternate history in New York City and is a blend of science fiction and mystery. And if you like the steampunk aesthetic, you might like this book, you might connect with it. The Morningstar twins were inventive, creating much of the infrastructure in the city with their new technology. They built trains, machines, and skyscrapers until one day they disappeared. But before they disappeared, they built an elaborate puzzle within the city called the Old York Cipher. And this cipher has never been solved. But Tess and Theo, two twins living in a Morningstar building, and their friend, Jamie Cruz, are determined to solve the mystery in order to save their apartment building, which is under threat of redevelopment. And this is a little bit of a longer book, but it's a good choice for those who like mysteries and those who like series books. York is the first book in a trilogy. The final book in this trilogy was just published in 2020, so you could read the whole series and not have to wait for the final installment since it's currently out and available. And our last recommendation for this summer is Games of Deception by Andrew Marinas. The full title of this book is actually Games of Deception, the true story of the first U.S. Olympic basketball team at the 1936 Olympics in Hitler's Germany. And this is a nonfiction book. And this book summarizes the experience of the first Olympic basketball team from the United States and their experience traveling to Berlin to represent the country in the Olympics. And this book also describes the invention of basketball by James Naismith in Springfield, Massachusetts, and it gets into detail about how the sport itself was created. And it follows the sport of basketball all the way through its inclusion in the Olympic Games. So in 1936, Germany was hosting the Olympics, and Hitler's discrimination against Jewish people was being witnessed around the world. The Americans have to decide between their excitement to compete at the Olympic level for the first time or to choose to opt out. This book also includes photographs from the time, so if you're a fan of basketball or history, you'll enjoy this multi-themed nonfiction book. So those are our 10 summer reading recommendations for rising 8th graders for 2021. And we hope that you can find a couple books here that you are excited to read. There are a number of places that you can get these books and access these books. And one of them is Nonesuch Books here in the Mill Creek Plaza in South Portland. We have a great partnership with Nonesuch Books, and they do have copies of this list so they can point you in the right direction if you're looking for a summer reading book. The South Portland Public Library also is a great resource for finding these books or any other book. They have a copy of our summer reading list as well, and you can use your public library card to borrow any of those. Also want to recommend a lot of other local bookstores. I know Bull Moose Music here in South Portland also has a fantastic book selection, and the greater Portland area has plenty of small local bookstores that would be happy to help you find something to read this summer. For those of you who can access Sora from a personal computer at home this summer, we have many of these titles available on Sora, so that's another good resource for those who can access that this summer. And then might I recommend that you pick one book and a friend pick another, and then you could swap books afterward. It's a great way to have two books for the price of one, and also to stay social and engaged in our summer reading recommendations. We hope that you have a great summer, and we really look forward to seeing all of you again in the fall for your final year at Mahoney as an 8th grader.